it's Laura. I am very excited for all of the end of the year, beginning of the year type videos. So my best books and my 2021 wrap up and all of that. But before we get into the best books, we have to wrap up the year. And before we wrap up the year, I want to wrap up the quarter. So this is going to be my quarterly review and my top 6 books of the last quarter of 2021. So let's get into some quick stats. In the months of October, November, and December, I read a total of 41 books, which was actually my second highest quantity of books read all year. As far as star ratings, I had 1 2-star, I had 9 3-stars, 12 4-stars, and 19 5-stars, which was also the second highest amount of 5 stars in any other quarter. As far as the genres I've read, it's pretty much the usual. I read 20 fantasies, 4 sci-fis, 4 thrillers, and 1 mystery. The only difference being that because we had the spooky month, I read 12 horror, which is definitely the most horror that I've read all year. And then for age categories, age ranges, I read 21 adult books, 19 young adult books, and 1 middle grade. I definitely did not read a lot of middle grade this year at all. That's something that I definitely want to do better with next year. But that's pretty much it for my stats. I'm very excited for my quarterly wrap-ups for 2022. I'm going to be doing things a little bit differently and tracking some more things, so I think that should be really fun. But now it's time to just get into the top 6 books of the 4th quarter. I could not just pick 5. I ended up reading so many good books in the month of December alone and October. It was very hard to narrow down to even 6, but here we are, in no particular order, my best books of the quarter. So the first one I'm going to talk about is A Traitor's Blade by Sebastian D. Castell. This is one that I read in December and absolutely adored. I was so happy because I was so worried about not enjoying this, especially after how badly things went for me with his Spellslinger series. But this being adult fantasy, I think was what improved things for me. This was just such a fun time. We're following our main character Falkio along with his 2 friends Brasti and Kest. Falkio and his friends were greatcoats who were traveling magisters that traveled the land upholding the king's law, bringing justice to the common people. And then the king died and they were seen as traitors and are dishonored now, and everyone looks down on them. They are trying to fulfill the king's last wish, which is the last kind of mission that he sent them on before he died. And this is about all the things that happened along the way. And it's so much fun. It's just such a great adventure. It's such a great time. I loved the humor in here. I love these characters. There were times that I actually teared up because our main character Falkio has just been through so much, and we get like flashbacks to him first meeting the king and the relationship that they had, and it was just so beautiful, and you really come to love the dead king in here. You just love all the characters, you can't help it. Kest was definitely one of my favorites. I absolutely love him. He's just such a sweet teddy bear. And I'm so excited to continue on with this series. I'm so glad that I finally got to read this and I didn't put it off. Well, I did put it off until the end of the year, but I'm so glad I finally got around to reading it. Can't believe it took me so long, but this was absolutely a 5 out of 5 stars. I cannot recommend it enough if you haven't read it yet, and very excited to continue on in the series. Another book that I read in December was Furyborn by Claire Legrand. This is another one that I have been putting off for years. I picked this book up in 2018, I think it was, and just never got around to reading it until the final month of 2021. It honestly could have been one of my favorite books of the year. I mean, I adored this. There's so much going on in here. So we're following 2 different women, 1,000 years apart, that are connected in some way. And when you find out the way they're connected, it's just so... The thing that Claire Legrand did is that she literally told us everything. She laid everything out in the beginning of the book, but we just didn't have the context to understand what it meant. And then when we get to the point where everything is revealed, it's like, obviously, you know, obviously, but it was still such an interesting surprise, an interesting twist. I just love the way this book was structured. I think that that's something that Claire Legrand does so well. The actual structure of the novel is just so brilliant, in my opinion. And of course I love these characters. We have Riel and Eliana. Riel is the queen that's living 1,000 years in the past. I definitely liked Eliana's perspective a lot more, but I found Riel's perspective to be very intriguing as well. I loved spending time with them and seeing the magic and how the world and everything has changed so much 1,000 years later, and what was once fact 1,000 years ago is now myth. I loved the side characters in here. I loved the adventure, how emotional this was. It was just, everything about this was so good, and I am so excited to continue on in this series. I hope it just gets better from here. Cannot wait to see what comes next. My next favorite is Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. This was so much fun. This is one of the funniest books I have ever read. It's just absolutely hilarious. In this world, there are these mercenary bands that are pretty much like the rock stars of this world. They go around, they go on tour, and everyone knows them, everyone loves them, they're famous. And we are following a main character named Clay Cooper, who was in this band called Saga. And Saga was the most feared, the most renowned group of mercenaries. Everyone loved them. They were legends in their time. But now they're older, they're kind of washed up, the band's not together anymore, you know, they're living their separate lives. But one day, one of Clay's bandmates, Gabriel, comes to him and says, I need your help. I want to get the band back together because my daughter has been taken and I need your help getting her back. And so these old men who are kind of washed up, decide to get the band back together and hit the road to save Gabriel's daughter. They're out of shape and they're just absolutely hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious seeing them try to be the men they once were, but at the same time it's so sweet because just the love that they have for each other is so sweet and so strong, and you can feel it. You know, they have their own families and lives and things, but the dynamic of all of them together, their banter, just all of it was so perfect. And some of the things that happen to them are just like completely ridiculous and over the top, but in the best way. I think Moog was absolutely my favorite character. He is the wizard of the group, and just the things that he says, the things that he does, the things that he gets into, it's just too much. It's too much. I laughed so much. I laughed out loud so much while reading this book, and it was one of the most fun experiences, reading experiences that I've ever had. So I definitely recommend this if you haven't gotten to it yet. I'm very excited to continue on in the series and read the next book, which I believe follows Gabriel's daughter. And I think there's even going to be another book in the series, which I'm really happy about. So absolutely loved this. So glad that I finally got around to reading it. Next, we have The Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty. This had to be on this list. I read this in October, I think it was, and I could not put it down. I read it in like 2 or 3 days. This is the second book in the Daevabad trilogy, the first book being The City of Brass, and I read that also this year. But in this, we're following our main character, Nahri, and she is kind of a con woman living on the streets of Cairo, does what she can to get by. And one day, she accidentally summons a jinn warrior. And after that, her life is thrown into complete chaos. She gets whisked away to Daevabad, the city of the jinn, and gets wrapped up in the politics, and so many things happen from there. This is the second book, and it was such an emotional ride. It was such an emotional roller coaster. I laughed, I cried, I got angry, like incredibly angry with the decisions that certain characters made in here. I just didn't understand why would you do that? But it was so good. It was so good. I was so invested in this book, and I'm very excited to continue or to finish the series out this month. Actually, I'm going to be reading the third book. But Kingdom of Copper was amazing, and I couldn't not put it on the list. It's absolutely one of my favorites. This is probably going to be one of my new favorite series ever. Second to last, we have A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee. Something I discovered about my reading taste this year is that I really love the combination of dark fantasy, gothic atmosphere, and incredibly lush, lyrical, beautiful writing. And this had all of that. This is a dark academia YA thriller. We're following a main character who comes back to finish out her last year at this very prestigious boarding school after having a very tragic experience the year before. End up looking into the school's history, which has a very dark past. There were 5 girls that were killed at the school in various ways. The school has a history of witchcraft, and it's a very witchy book as well. I absolutely adored this, and it was just like all vibes for me. You know, it's all vibes. We're following characters who are not the best people, but you can't help but love them. And the relationship between the 2 main characters, Felicity and Ellis, was beautiful and tragic, even though it was problematic. It was just everything that I needed at the time, and I didn't realize I needed, because this has become like my new thing. I have 2 books on here that have very similar vibes, even though they're very different stories, but very similar vibes, very similar atmosphere, and the writing, Victoria Leigh's writing, is just stunning. It's so beautiful. I absolutely adored this, and I want more people to read it and enjoy it. So if you haven't read it yet, please pick up A Lesson in Vengeance. And then the very last book, probably my favorite book of the quarter, number 1, is Lake's Edge by Lyndall Clipstone. This came as such a surprise. I did not expect to love this book as much as I did. This is a debut author, but just kind of picked this up on a whim because it sounded interesting, and I had heard some things about it, some good things about it. And I adored this. This is a book, is one of the only books that has even come close to the way I felt when I first read The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, which, if you don't know, is my favorite book of all time. The writing in here is stunning, absolutely stunning, lyrical, beautiful, poetic. The atmosphere in here is its own character. It has such a strong atmosphere. It is a gothic, dark fantasy YA that is kind of a Hades and Persephone retelling, but very, very loosely. It just kind of uses that mythos. In here, it's not directly a retelling or anything, but I loved that. I love the dark, romantic vibes of this. So this is, once again, just like A Lesson in Vengeance. It's all vibes. Yes, the plot is great, and it has a very strong plot, but it's the vibes for me. And the relationship in here between our main character and the god of death is chef's kiss. I adored this so much. I am so glad that I read this book. I highly, highly recommend, and I cannot wait for the second book to come out. I think it's going to be a duology. So that is it. Those are my top 6 books of the quarter and my short little quarterly wrap up. I hope you enjoyed. Talk to me down in the comments. Let me know your thoughts and opinions. Let me know what your favorite book of the last quarter of 2021 was. And now that we have wrapped up the quarter, we can get into wrapping up the entire year, and then we can get into my best books, which I am very excited to talk to you guys about. So that is going to be it from me today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and I will see you in my next one. Bye, guys.